from Marvel's point of view and the MCU's point of view, this is an origin story, because it's like setting up these characters and these actors as these characters, and this is them at their baseline, and this is where they'll go next. So in a way, they kind of had they're quite sneaky. They kind of had the cake and eat it.
Hello and welcome to Spoiler Chat, aka Weird Space Baby 2, the movie. We're talking about Fantastic Four. We're talking about the Fantastic Four First Steps. It's the definitive Fantastic Four film. And I'm joined today by Maria Latilla, Ryan Lambie.
You're right.
And I'm James Harvey. We're talking about Marvel's latest blockbuster, which sees its first family facing off against the villainous and very hungry Galactus. We've all seen the film. We had some instant reactions. Let's take a look at those now.
The Fantastic Four First Steps is really bloody good. Marvel's had a bit of a string of not bad films, but disappointing films. And this absolutely fixes that. This is Marvel at its best. The whole film reminded me of why I fell in love with Marvel in the first place. It has this kind of lightness of the early Marvel films, and I could not have loved it.
Fantastic Four, a film I both enjoyed and felt a bit frustrated by in certain places. Partly because for the first 40 minutes, it felt like Marvel were really going to try something different, and some really interesting themes, a villain with a quite different motivation, and an actual moral conundrum, which I feel like we've not seen for a while in a Marvel film.
I've got a feeling I'm going to be the only one shitting on Fantastic Four First Steps. Star Trek Into Darkness.
Almost approaching a Star Trek episode. No spoilers in this bit, we'll get to those later. And for a minute there, it felt like the film was going to properly explore these ideas of family and becoming a parent and notions of sacrifice and things like this. And it kind of just becomes a typical Marvel film for the last section. Lots of crashes and bangs, falling skyscrapers. And I felt almost like Charlie Brown trying to kick Lucy's football, and the football gets whisked away.
It's hard to bring Marvel's first family to the screen, as we've seen in the early 2000s and then again 2015. But they did it. Huge props to director Matt Shakman and the cast. The cast are so perfect in their roles. I can't even believe how well they fit and how well they were written. I actually cared about these people. They felt like a real family, which is so rare these days.
I thought just for a second it was going to kind of follow through on some of these themes that it introduced in the first half that it kind of forgets about. But all the same, superb production design, superb performances. I really liked Pedro Pascal's arc, and also seeing a superhero whose main power is his intellect rather than his brawn. I thought this was a good film, but it could have been brilliant. Cheers.
Okay, so it's safe to say we had some more mixed opinions on this one, but before we get into the nitty-gritty of who's right and who's wrong, Maria, this is the 37th film in the MCU, I think. I've lost count. And there's been umpteen TV shows on top of that. What's the status of the MCU right now? Where are we? What's happening?
I mean, I think the more accurate question is, what is it happening? Because before the Fantastic Four First Steps, Marvel was a bit everywhere. It's a bit of a mess. I think Kevin Feige would be the first one to admit that as well. I mean, he's already said we went a bit too quantity over quality, which I think is putting it mildly after a few absolute disasters. But yeah, like you said, 37th film. And they very clearly need to find their direction again. After Avengers Endgame, which brought their Infinity Saga to a close, they've really been finding their way. And they tried to find their way with Kang. We were supposed to get Avengers Kang Dynasty next year. We're not getting it. because of Jonathan Majors having some legal troubles, which we won't go into. Instead, we're going to be having Dr. Doom in Avengers Doomsday, and I'm sure we'll get to him a little bit later. But this is very much introducing Marvel's, what they like to call, first family. Fantastic Four is massive in the comics. They haven't been so massive on screen until now, really. But this is huge in terms of comic book fans finally seeing one of the biggest Marvel properties on the big screen. So this is very much a new start for Marvel in many ways. I believe this starts, is it phase 6 now? We're in phase 6. Not that anyone cares about these phases anymore. We lost count about 3 phases ago. No one cares. But in a lot of ways, this is a fresh start for the studio. It doesn't immediately tie in to other films. I have ideas of how it ties to future Marvel films until, the end credits, obviously. There's a nice little surprise there. But yeah, basically Marvel is trying to get out of the mess that they've created on their own and towards a brighter future. I'd say that's really where we are with the whole studio and what's coming up next.
Yeah, it's a very good summary. Lovely. And yeah, like you say, it takes place this film takes place it's generally unconnected to the rest of the MCU because it takes place on a different Earth in a sort of retro 60s utopia, which we'll get into later. But first, yeah, it's worth mentioning. You mentioned Fantastic Four hasn't been very big on the big screen before. It has had a fair number of adaptations, all varying degrees of success. So it had a few cartoons from the 60s onwards. It's a Hanna-Barbera cartoon in 1967 that they reference in this film, actually, quite a lot. It's which is quite a nice touch. There was also, I don't know if you guys found this, there's a 1975 radio series with Bill Murray starring as Johnny Storm, which I think this is a pre-Saturday Night Live Bill Murray. And it must be, as far as Johnny Storm goes, is like sort of a energetic playboy, mischievous whiskey. I don't think you could cast any worse than Bill Murray. He sounds about as excited to play Johnny Storm as he does in any of his roles afterwards. I listened to that over the weekend. It's a very odd radio show. But apart from that radio show and the cartoons, we had some film versions. There was Roger Corman's famous unreleased version that never made its way into cinemas. Yeah, and of course there were some slightly more successful versions released in 2005 and 2007, directed by Tim Story. Those made a lot of money in the box office, were generally panned by critics. I quite like them. I think they're quite charming in a sort of not very good sort of way. And
they haven't aged well.
I don't think they were aging well as we watched them. I'll say, I remember even as a 7-year-old watching the first Fantastic Four film where Jessica Alba can't be invisible unless she takes all the clothes off, thinking, this feels suspect. But after those, we had the infamous 2015 reboot, which I watched at the weekend and is odd. It took the whole series in a very dark, strange body horror-esque direction that no one seemed to think worked, either critics or audience. And then that brings us 10 years later into 2025. Marvel are trying to reboot the franchise again with a more sort of family-friendly first family film. One of the real highlight, like sort of the big marketing pushes around this film, there's been two really. One of them is the 60s retro setting, which really gets shown off in the first half an hour, 40 minutes of the film, and I really enjoyed. Ryan, what did you think of the sort of whole 60s sci-fi nature of it all?
I thought it was lovely. I think one of the big strengths of this film is it actually has some really individual production design compared to some other Marvel films we've seen recently. It really leans into the kind of 60s roots of the comics. and it feels like it's referencing a lot of films from that sort of period as well, sort of 50s sci-fi B movies. Um, and it feels like they've built a lot as well. Like Herbie the robot feels like a physical thing that was on set, which is good. It's got that lovely sort of curvaceous sort of 50s, 60s set design, and lots of chrome everywhere. It's a really pretty looking film.
Yeah, there's a lot of physical media involved as well, which I actually really appreciated.
Yeah,
There's-
records and VHS. Like Kirby's face is essentially kind of like a reel-to-reel tape, isn't it?
I really loved that. That was I think one of my favorite, just before they go to space and they go, oh, we've got to swap out Kirby's face tape to what was it? Swapping it for like a space friendly one or something? Or,
Yeah, I can't remember that term. Yeah,
I can't
It's
remember
like
the reason.
space mode.
Yeah. But yeah, I really enjoyed that, and I really loved the 60s. Maria, what did you think of the whole 60s bit of it?
Yeah, like Ryan said, it just looks so pretty, and I'd have to agree. It's just nice to have a Marvel film that has a style. I think they've been much stronger on TV when it comes to kind of making them stand out. And it's no wonder, because the director, Matt Shackman, he also did Wonder Vision, which also had this kind of period look. So I think it was a really smart move to bring him on board to kind of not restart the MCU, but kind of bring in this new, fresh take on these heroes and make space for something a little bit more unique. And I really appreciated that. I think they should absolutely do this again. Maybe not this specific thing, but, try out a little something different every now and again. Why not?
It can go wrong though, can't it? I was thinking when I watched it about Wonder Woman 1984, Wonder Woman 84, and how that sort of tried to go for that sort of very cliched view of the 80s, lots of neon and big shoulder pads and everything.
Also
And it
starring
was-
Pedro Pascal.
Yeah, very clean shaven Pedro Pascal, which he doesn't like.
He doesn't like that, does he?
But that went wrong, and I'd say this doesn't. I think they've done enough here to make a good evening at the movies.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think to me the whole film felt sort of fine. I actually would say as I think you mentioned in your reaction video, Ryan, I really loved the first half hour, 40 minutes.
Yeah, great.
Because I thought we were getting something with more of a sense of style and something a bit more unusual from Marvel. And
thematically meaty as well.
Yeah.
That's what I felt it was setting up. I felt it was heading towards something that felt quite fresh. Yeah, it felt quite different for Marvel. And then it kind of got to the midpoint, which I think was it felt like everything was heading towards this kind of a big payoff. And then the second half ended up being a standard Marvel film with lots of flashes and bangs and wormholes and things.
Yeah, I mean for me it's exactly the same. I mean, literally the second they leave the atmosphere, I think I essentially just lost all interest. I'm afraid. It felt so bland, and because I think this is what I think Marvel has a problem with space. I think they've since I think James Gunn's Guardian of the Galaxy was the first film that they did that properly spent a lot of time in outer space. I think Thor did it a little bit, but that's going to more different worlds and stuff. But
yeah, it's more a means to an end, wasn't it, rather than like a space opera as such.
Yeah, and I just think that 37 films in, they've run like all of their space scenes. Just they're spending so much time in space, and it's all the same. And the world that they travel to, where Galactus lives, you think, oh, I've seen that planet before. Like, I think they run out of planet sort of environs to inhabit, and I think whereas the Guardians of the Galaxy films sort of managed to imbue them with a certain amount of like character and vision. I just don't think the rest of the films managed to do that. I mean, it just looks like they're in a sort of set cast off from Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
I think the thing that pulled me out of it wasn't so much that, it was the decision, and I can see why they did it. It was purely because she had to be there. That an incredibly pregnant Sue Storm would go on a space mission. I mean, she must be almost at term, right? So 9 months pregnant, and she's going under all the stresses of leaving Earth's atmosphere and being in zero gravity, and the stresses of seeing a giant god at the other end of the universe. Like, what did they think was going to happen? And I know that's kind of might sound like a churlish nitpick, but I think it's part of a filmmaker's job, and a writer and a director, whoever, to kind of appeal to your 12-year-old brain and shut the adult brain off. I think you mentioned James Gunn. James Gunn's quite good at that in his best moments. He can make you just go with it. And for me, that was just, I don't know if it's just because, my life experiences of being a dad and stuff, but it was just kind of like, that's just ridiculous. You'd leave Sue at home. And they could have still had like a dramatic thing, that involved the baby and giving birth and all the rest of it. But, in zero G, on a spaceship, in front of a black hole, while being chased, and it was an incredibly dry birth as well. I know this is like a 12A film, and like even in an 18-rated film, you couldn't show exactly what childbirth looks like.
In
but my
zero
God,
gravity,
that spaceship would have been messy. Like you can't spill a drink in space without causing terrible, terrible trouble. Like I said, this probably sounds like a nitpick, but that was where a crack started to show in it for me. That I was just like, I don't know, man.
Also, if Sue, I mean, obviously plot-wise, it's really important that Sue goes to space that heavily pregnant. But if she was left at home, I think that would have been she's just a mother. She's just pregnant. I really appreciated it. And I'm going to put my feminist hat on for this one. I really appreciated it that she was pregnant and still in space and just as, powerful as the men around her. And she wasn't held back by the fact that she's also about to be a mother. I thought
there's a life inside her, though, that she's responsible for. I think even a feminist would say, well, you've got to look after the baby that's inside you. That's why people have maternity leave.
But there's also a planet-eating god. Like, this isn't exactly, rooted in realism. And I think that kind of gives you a bit of playing field with that. Like, if we're willing to accept that, there's a silver woman on a space board, then I can also believe that Sue Storm goes to space. Even if it's a terrible, terrible choice on her part, maybe. But also, if all the men in her life said, oh, sorry, you've got to stay home, you can't come, I would have been pissed. I would have been so angry. So if I can believe all of this is happening, I can believe that Sue would go to space, however terrible that decision is on her part.
Yeah, I think it potentially would have been it would have felt strange for the Fantastic Four's first meeting with the big bad to only have 3 of them. But I think you're right for me, Ryan. It did feel odd, but I think it for me it more highlights where you're at with the film at that point, if that makes sense. Because I'm always a big fan of letting films have plot holes. I think the fact that you spot a plot hole generally means that the rest of the film isn't working, rather than that the plot hole itself is an issue. Because like you said, I mean, if you're on board with the film at that point, Maria, and you're still like swept into the world, you're kind of like, oh yeah, but I'm, there's space gods, I'm fine. Whereas if you're more on the fence, maybe, I think it can, that sort of thing can then just add up and then sort of it's really ruin your enjoyment slightly. But I mean, you mentioned Julie Garner's Silver Space Lady, and this is something this is something that I think I'm trying to be very careful here, because I'm very cautious about. All cards on the table, I've not really enjoyed a Marvel film in a very long time. No, that's not true because I liked Thunderbolts, but before that, I'd not really enjoyed a Marvel film since Endgame, and I think okay, fine, I liked Guardians 3, but the rest of them, I think, for me, a lot of it comes back to visual effects in as something that's more emblematic of the problems of the franchise. I've seen a lot of people say that Fantastic Four First Steps makes it makes changes to like because I think the last few Marvel films have clearly suffered from rushed visual effects. There's been a lot of sort of whistleblowing coming from the visual effects industry saying how Marvel movies make changes up until the last minute. They're all overworked, overstressed, and increasing numbers of visual effects companies are refusing to work with Marvel because their working conditions are increasingly stressful. But and I think it's definitely shown in the films. And to be honest, when people say Fantastic Four First Steps looks great, I have no idea what they're on about because for the second half, I saw exactly the same visual effects problems that we've been seeing for 5 years now. And the reason I brought up Julia Garner's Silver Surfer is because I genuinely thought she looked like a Resident Evil 5 character. Like, there's something in about the completely. I don't know if it's the design that she's obviously she's got completely silver eyes, and it's very obviously very hard to make emotion come out of those. But the whole I don't think they nailed the visual effects at all in this.
What wasn't
do you guys
photo
think?
real, was it?
No, Ryan, what did you think?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. In my memory, it doesn't look much better than the 2007 Silver Surfer. But that's me going on my memory. If I went back to the film, it probably looks a hell of a lot worse than I'm remembering it. But I just about bought it in the end. I think when I first saw her, I was thinking, I'm not sure really. She looks a bit kind of expressionless and a bit sort of wooden. The one that pulled me out of the film more was the baby, and I'm absolutely stunned at the weekend that this bit of news came out, probably straight from Marvel via Vanessa Kirby, and she said that 100% of the babies in this film were real. I was like, no, absolutely not. I'm sure they used real babies. I'm sure the actors were holding real babies at certain points. But number one, you can't get a baby to do half the things that happen in most of this film.
No.
In most of the big set pieces in this film, anyway. And B, in some shots, there's a wider shot of Ben Grimm holding the baby. I think they're on the balcony of their, I don't know, Fantastic HQ or whatever it is. And the baby just looks terrifying. I mean, it's clearly a CG baby. I don't know what it is about the recent just superhero films in general and terrifying babies, but like the ones in The Flash. Do you remember the scene where the
God.
Flash rescues the babies from the uncanny valley?
They were
From the
horrifying.
exploding hospital, and they're just like the most terrible nightmare fuel you've ever seen in your life. Yeah, and the other thing, like speaking of VFX, was that this whole film has this kind of 60s aesthetic and everything, which, like we said, the production design is really good. But when they actually go, there's a scene with the black hole, and they're like Sue Storm's giving birth and all the rest of it. And it's the post-Inception black hole. And I know this is really kind of like, again, nerdy and nitpicky and everything, but because this is supposed to be a 60s film with a 60s sci-fi thing, I wanted it to look like a whirlpool, like they used to look like before Inception. Did I say Inception?
You did. You mean Interstellar?
I meant Interstellar.
Yeah.
Sorry. All too many of these films begin with int. Interstellar. Which, as we all know, that is what black holes apparently do look like, according to science and clever people. But I just wanted a black hole that looked like the one out of the Disney black hole from 1979.
I just want like a spinning top painted funky
it's a whirlpool
colours
in space.
Yeah.
It's just like, water going down a plug hole. That's what black holes are supposed to look like, not this. I refuse to accept reality. And then, like I said, the second half of the film, like especially the last 30 minutes, it's like, we're doing the city disintegrating thing again, and we're doing big flashy lights in the sky and wormholes and portals and things, which I thought was a bit, okay. I feel like there was possibly a different version of this script somewhere. going off topic a little bit. But yeah, I think, yeah, VFX wise, some brilliant stuff in it and some not so brilliant stuff in it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the going back to the black hole, what Marvel hasn't quite found yet, I think, is the balance between what should look quite real when it comes to the VFX and kind of the more fantastical elements, and then what should be just really out there and look just as unreal as it kind of is in scientific terms. I think that's a
They've
really
definitely
tricky
gone the wrong
balance.
side of that for the baby.
We're a bit on the American
100% real
Sniper
baby.
kind of territory with the baby. But yeah, I think it's a really tricky balance to nail. And I don't know how many superhero films have actually found that balance and kind of successfully went with that balance. But yeah, I think that's where, and this film more than any other maybe Marvel film has an even trickier time with it, because they are trying to create a world that needs to feel real, that really isn't. Unlike something like Iron Man, which is set on Earth, is set on our Earth, and we recognize New York and whatever, and they look pretty much exactly as they should look and will look if I now take a plane to New York. Aside from the fact that there's no Avengers Tower, which is sad for me. But yeah, I think this film, it set itself quite a difficult task, and I don't know. I loved the film, but I don't know how well it found that balance for me personally.
Yeah, I think it's strange because it is. I mean, at the same time, it's essentially just set in the 60s. Plus, you just got to make like a period accurate 60s setting and then throw in the odd, computer that looks like it's made out of a radio.
It's a very rose tinted 60s though, isn't it? There's none of the turbulence that was also in the 60s. There's no Vietnam War or civil rights movements or smoking. Nobody smokes, which is insane. Because everyone was smoking in the 60s. I know this because I watched Mad Men.
Well, I mean, this is something I was going to bring up later as well. I mean, I feel like as much as the production design for the 60s is really great, I don't think it engages with the 60s themes at all. And one bit I think, which we'll talk about, is I think almost antithetical. And how do you pronounce that word? What is that word? That I'm thinking?
Antithetical.
Antithetical. We've all learned a new word today. Antithetical to what it sort of means to be 60s and protest in the popular, I mean, that sort of thing. But just one more thing on visual effects, because in the run up to this, there was a lot of chatter online about how it's difficult to bring the Fantastic Four to screen because Reed Richards' stretchy powers are really hard to get right in CGI. How did we think the original, the core superpowers looked? Because I am mixed.
It got around.
There's a reason.
They got around
we
Reed
don't
Richards
see
one by
much.
not showing any.
Yeah.
He didn't use them that much, really, his stretchiness. I think there was probably one or two major scenes where he properly used them. And there was obviously the bit where he gets stretched by Galactus.
Like that bit.
But I mean, it was fine. It's all right. I mean, they didn't. It felt like they didn't really know what to do with some of the characters, and I was a bit confused by. This might be from the comics. I'm not a big comics reader, but Johnny Storm's fiery Mr. Human Torch powers. It feels like he can turn himself into fire, but he doesn't always burn things. I presume it's like some sort of cold flame. Sometimes he'll burn things when he feels like it. But other times he was standing by a pin board with all these little notes pinned to it. And he's on fire, and they didn't even go black or anything.
And he's walking around in all these lovely 60s carpets. And I think this is...
Yeah, they weren't known for their fire retardants, were they?
Yeah, I mean, I rewatched Josh Trant's 2015 film over the weekend. And I mean, apart from the fact that film is generally, to be polite, a fantastic car crash. It was striking to see the difference in visual effects 10 years ago to now. Because when the film came out at the time, I think people were saying, oh, there's unfinished visual effects shots. Some of the visual effects aren't that great. I would say, in comparison to your average modern Marvel movie, it is surprisingly consistent. I don't think anything in it is going to blow you away, but I think, for one thing, they got Sue Storm's powers right. Whereas in this one, they just seem to rub some Vaseline on the screen whenever she holds her hands out, and it just looks bizarre when she's creating like a force field or something. The Human Torch as well. There were plenty of shots where I saw Joseph Quinn supposedly being on fire, and it just sort of looked like he was slightly brightly lit, stood in front of a big candle, and it didn't feel like it had the effort put into it. Not the effort, that's unfair. The time put into it to make it look sort of as good as we know it can be. And I think that is the problem for me with modern Marvel in general, is that because when the visual effects look as ropey as they do, and they're on these huge blockbuster budgets, it just gives you the impression that the people making them either don't care or aren't given enough resources to complete the work that they're supposed to do. Like, it doesn't feel like they're taking the job of entertaining people seriously, which may be, horribly unfair. And I'm sure there's a very overworked visual effects house behind the scenes, but
Several.
Yeah, but it just doesn't. I think it compound when the script ends up being sort of, it takes what could be an okay script, but then makes it sort of, it just never comes together for me. It just feels surprisingly low effort for a $200 million blockbuster.
Is there maybe a problem, and this isn't me necessarily saying that this film looks great, but could it be also that Fantastic Four might be the most difficult kind of group to get it right with visual effects ever? Because a lot of the superheroes that we see in Marvel is people just shooting things out of their hands, or Thor's big hammer, or Captain America's just really bloody righteous. But these are like Johnny Storm, he is just fire. And whereas Ben Grimm, the Thing, you can whack the actor in a nice little grey unitard and do all of that in visual effects, the whole character. Is this ever going to look as good when they just all of a sudden they become their powers? Or like Reed Richards, that's always been difficult. But even Johnny Storm, is he ever going to look that good? Even if you pour way more money into visual effects and give some poor visual effects artist 2 years to do it, would it ever look better?
But I actually think in the 2015 one, it does look better. I think in the 2015 one, it looks fine. It's not spectacular. They essentially just but I think in that one, they do essentially digitally replace Michael B. Jordan with sort of silhouette on fire, which is a design choice that maybe wouldn't work with this one. But it's a combination of visual effects and design choice that then makes something that you don't see and go, that looks a bit off. Because in that film, there's plenty of things in 2015 Fantastic Four that take you out of the film, but I don't think that's one of them.
I think one of the things as well is that it's not just about quality, because that's kind of sometimes a little bit hard to quantify, because especially in something like this, because it doesn't require photorealism, like I said about Silver Surfer. It almost would weaken it if you tried to make her look absolutely photoreal, because it's the whole concept of it is so out there and strange and comic booky.
They could have saved a lot of money by just painting her silver, though.
Well, what I was going to say was I almost wish that they'd gone the same way with the VFX they did with the production design, which is that you also make the VFX themselves feel somewhat retro and almost like I saw a film the other day, Red Sonja, and it's probably made for a fraction of the budget of this. And one of the really cute things they do in that is there's this gigantic Cyclops in it. And then rather than try and make it look like a photoreal Cyclops, they make it look with VFX. They make it look like a Ray Harryhausen stop motion creature. So it has this real kind of charm to it and personality. And it's one of the sort of like more sort of delightful moments in that film. Really, I sort of, that made me think about this. That so there's this effort to make everything have this kind of sheen. This sort of. But then at the same time, there's clearly a drive to sort of push down costs because you've got all these special effects companies that are bidding against each other to make shots at a lower cost. We know this, from all sorts of reports. And so there's a kind of like a tug of war almost between what Marvel thinks audiences want, which is massive wholesale destruction and incredible detail, and then trying to do that on a budget. Whereas for this, it almost would have looked good if it looked more like a B movie in some of these sort of widescreen, big, smashy moments. Like I think, what did everybody think of how this compared to Superman, the James Gunn Superman we just had, VFX wise?
I would say, I think you're right in that I don't think James Gunn's Superman looked spectacular, but there was no point in that where I felt the visual effects were bad enough that they were taking me out of the story. And I think you're right. Part of it is a design thing. Like I think in James Gunn's Superman, there is a very clear stylistic choice.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think in this one they've made a stylistic choice because it is Marvel and they have their house style that everything has to, in some degree, fit into, which is a real shame because, I mean, if you look at something like, is it the most recent Spider-Verse film? Was it Across?
Across.
Yeah. Where they go into separate reality, because this takes place in Earth 828, I think, which is, I've been told, a different Earth to R1. And because they're in a separate universe, why not, like you said, Ryan, completely reinvent the visual look of the film? And then, when they come into our universe in Doomsday, they can fit in with everyone else. But for now, they could do something really cool. And like Across the Spider-Verse does, where they go into the watercolor world or words in different art styles, they could do something like that. And that would have really made it look like something different. But yeah.
Are they just scared to do that? Do you think Kevin Feige is like, no, keep to the house style? Is that it? Like, do you think they're scared that people would just kick off, like general audiences? Because I think Silver Surfer could have just been painted silver. I think that would have looked really cool, and you could have done sort of like makeup stuff, really kind of strong contour and stuff that would have made her look really kind of strong and not necessarily kind of having just makeup on, but just creating those shapes and things. But is there just a fear that people will kick off if they don't pour all this money into visual effects and try and make things look, I mean, they don't look very real, do they? But trying to find, I think they are still looking for some kind of photorealism. They're just not very good at it necessarily. So is that the fear, maybe, that they can't try something a bit more out there?
I think they've perfected they feel like they've perfected a formula and a pipeline. I think there's an element of that. And I think there's been things written about them having prevised action sequences and things months and months before they've even hired a director. So that there's a certain approach that I think they have and they have to make these things quite quickly. I think once they actually come together, because they talk about things in terms of phases, it's almost like making a very huge, expensive TV series where everything has to slot together. So I think there's an element. Again, it's that kind of tug of war between time and quality and money. The old triangle thing. And yeah, so I think they probably do struggle to sort of break out of that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think they just genuinely don't have the time, is what I would sort of add to that. I mean, like you say, they have to pump them out at such a fast rate. It's not even so much a time, like they don't have the time to physically make visual effects shots. It's they don't have the creative time at the start to design them. I mean, there's been some more news coming out today about Avengers Doomsday, which is I think it started filming in April, and apparently they still haven't finished the script. And I think there were similar reports coming out of Fantastic Four at the time. It's the Marvel's standard way of filming now is you start filming and then you sort of do things on the fly. Kevin Feige's talked about this in a recent interview, where they're making changes right up into the last minute, and you have to wonder if at some point someone's going to turn around and say, "Well, no, it's not working," because for this film, the last hour looks, you could copy and paste it into a dozen other films Marvel has made in the last 20 years or so, and it would look, and it wouldn't be out of place. And it's just when you have got this sort of really perfected formula, it's something they keep falling back on because they don't have the time to think, okay, what are we going to do with this that's different? Like you say, they might even have hired a director yet. And they can do this acceptably. I don't think the last hour is awful by any means, but it is something that we've seen 100 times before, and it's something Marvel has got very comfortable with doing.
I think it seemed more glaring to me because of how different the first half an hour was or so, because the fact that you had a Marvel film that actually started with a dialogue scene indoors, like in a bedroom, it's intimate. You've got, Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby, and they're talking about becoming parents, and you establish a really interesting theme there, which we've not seen in a Marvel film before, which is, the sort of anxiety that goes with becoming a new parent. And also, if you really sort of look at it, it's kind of about their fear of their baby having like a genetic problem, which every parent in the back of their heads knows. Until your baby's born, you can't know, what it's going to, how healthy it will be. You can have all sorts of scans and things, which actually Pedro Pascal tries to do. And I thought the really touching thing about it as well was that Reed Richards, his whole arc really is about his fear of uncertainty, and how he's kind of, he's one of his superpowers, I suppose, is that he's smart. He's one of the smartest people on the planet, and so he's constantly trying to kind of work out every possible scenario, and plan everything to the nth degree. And then he realizes that one of the things about being a father is that you can't cover every eventuality. You can't. And I thought that was all so interesting and so well realized through those actors, and some good writing too, actually. And then it hits that midpoint, or that reaches the sort of zenith, where I think Guillermo del Toro said that the best story you could have is when your central character realizes their worst fear. They face their worst fear, and his worst fear is that he doesn't have control. He's just totally doesn't know what to do next. That all his reaching for certainty is out of his grasp now. I think he turns around to everyone's gathered, aren't they, when they come back from seeing Galactus, and he's like, I don't know what the exact line is. I can't remember. It's like, I don't know what, I don't know what to do. I don't know what happens next. And that's kind of like, for me, that's like that's the pinnacle. And after that, then it became a Marvel movie again. And I was like, and you can feel it slipping into it. And I was like, oh man.
I think, as well as touching on the writing, I think one thing that weirdly stood out for me that really feels like it shouldn't almost was Sue and Reed call each other babe and baby, and it's just something so small that makes you think like, oh, maybe they are actually real people in a real relationship, like they have like pet names for each other. And it just felt, like that first scene felt so authentic. And then it ends with the line, I think, Reed's trying to reassure Sue and says like, oh, nothing's going to change. And then obviously everything is going to change, except then that sort of, that's why the ending annoyed me so much, is you get to the end and literally nothing has changed. It's, the family's all still there. The baby's born. It's sort of fine. Galactus didn't eat the planet.
Well, this is the other thing as well, is that it sets up. We've got Star Trek in our notes here, and this film actually sets up a moral dilemma. My memory for things related to Marvel is patchy sometimes, but I feel like this is the first time in a while we've actually had not just stakes but a moral dilemma, which is you could save the Earth or you could save your baby. And obviously, they're not going to sacrifice their baby, but even so, it creates this real tension And it's like, wow, like for a few minutes there, I was like, wow, like what are they going to do? That's that you've got my attention. That's really interesting. It's not just, because we've seen millions of these sorts of films where the planet's under threat and all this kind of thing. But to have these personal stakes as well, and this sort of dilemma of like, what are they going to do? How are they going to get out of it? And then they go back to Earth, and everybody's rightly angry. It's like, right, so you're going to throw the entire planet under the bus for one lousy baby.
Lousy, not CGI baby.
Yeah, exactly. One terrifying baby. But
someone in the crowd should have pointed out that's not a real baby. It's made of computer. You can get rid of the computer baby. It's clearly an alien.
I thought for a minute they were going to kind of do a little bit more with that, more with the kind of them managing the sort of public outrage that these people that are supposed to protect Earth aren't, and maybe go a little bit further up than they did. And also, Galactus, right? So he says that he wants the baby. What does he want the baby for?
Well, he wants it. He says he's my salvation because he's tired of constantly being hungry and having to consume these planets. Like, he's constantly having to look for more, and he wants to basically give the baby that so he can go and have a nap finally. Oh, I think that rhymed a little bit. But yeah, no, that's why he wants the baby. He thinks this is so powerful. This baby is so powerful that he can take my power and I can go and rest finally.
See, my take on that was, in that moment when he gave his whole motivation, was that in some ways what he's talking about, it could be read that he wants death, that actually he just wants a release from this constant desire and this constant need all the time. And so I sort of thought, well, the baby clearly has some sort of power because of who its parents are. So is the ending actually going to be that the baby like unleashes some sort of incredible power and kills Galactus, and he's like, oh, thank you, finally release. Like Canterville Ghost, Oscar Wilde story I read when I was a kid. My brain just suddenly went to that. And obviously, you probably can't have a Marvel film where a baby kills a space god, as much as I'd like it. But instead, it kind of ducked all that, didn't it? It didn't really, like the whole idea of like, well, we just need to shove Galactus through a hole into the other side of the universe. Just felt like it didn't really address any of the things that the film sets up. If you know what I mean.
Well, that was the thing I mentioned earlier about the '60s, where in terms of the moral dilemma, when Vanessa Kirby's character there's an angry mob at the door of the Baxter building, and this is as you said before, it's the '60s. This is sort of famously an era of civil unrest, of civil rights, of protest, of like political turmoil, and everyone is, as you say, rightly peed off that that they're going to sacrifice the entire planet for this baby, and there's a mob at the door of the Baxter building. She just walks out holding the baby, and then the crowd just sort of like, oh well, obviously she's coming free. She must have something to say. Let's step back and let her come and stand on this podium. And you're like, what? No, why is there not more jeopardy? Like that moment is you'd had.
She is a superhero though, who can create force fields. So
yeah, so why didn't she? They should have had her creating force fields to push through the crowd, or having like the rest of the Fantastic Four have to like hold people back, or like security people holding people back because they're genuinely angry. Instead, it's like you've got this angry mob at the door, and they're sort of like, oh, please don't sacrifice our planet. We're bloody miffed with you sacrificing our planet to a giant, hungry, Ralph innocent man. And but obviously we'll hear you out. We'll hear what you have to say. And you think it's not. And then she gives one sort of semi-inspiring speech, and they all go, "Yep, that's fine. Let's go live underground with the mole people." And it just takes all the jeopardy out of it, entirely. And yeah, like I said, I don't think it captures the spirit of the '60s at all. Or at least not the '60s in popular culture, which I think is what could have been for. But anyway, we've been very. I'm conscious we've been very negative for the last 20 minutes. So let's talk about something which I think we can all probably broadly agree on as a positive, which is the casting. So Maria, why don't you talk about how well you thought the casting worked?
yeah, I mean, they're perfect for me. I mean, I think I like the film most out of us. But yeah, I thought Pedro Pascal, really different role for him. I think he's played these really confident characters. Or, Joel in The Last was very grumpy. And I thought here, playing someone so anxious, which I thought was really relatable on a personal level, he did really great. Joseph Quinn as Johnny Storm, what I really liked, and this is more a script thing, is it's really easy to make Johnny Storm just kind of like this bit of a ladies' man, quite quippy, funny. But this also showed that he's incredibly smart, so intelligent. And I really appreciated that. And I think Joseph Quinn really found that kind of fun balance to the character. His dynamic with Ben was great. And Sue Storm, Vanessa Kirby, she was really great in a film called Pieces of a Woman, where she also had a really traumatic birth, to be fair. So that might be her new kind of specialty. She's kind of the heart of the film for me. We talked, I think, when we did the Superman spoiler chat, about how in that film, kindness was a superpower. And in this one, it's motherhood. And again, as a woman, that felt really powerful. I'm not a mother, but still, I thought that nature being portrayed as a superpower felt really, really good. It felt, like I said, powerful. And I really, really appreciated that.
I said much about Ben Grimm, Ebon Moss-Bachrach. I, I thought he was good in it, but it didn't. It felt like he didn't have much for him to do, which I thought was a bit of a shame.
I
Like
think
he
a
had
lot
a bit,
got cut out.
yeah, something happened, didn't it? Because like he had a kind of love interest in like Russian doll. Natasha Lyonne turns up, and but it doesn't really kind of. It's just something giving him something to do rather than sort of furthering the plot of the themes or anything like that.
I really liked their little dynamic. Actually, I thought that was a really sweet. I think yeah, it was very light, and maybe it would have been nice to see a little bit more. But I really liked the sort of dynamic that they had. I think yeah, it's odd coming from. I mean, even at the 2005 Fantastic Four, I think they didn't really do much reckoning with the fact that he's the only one of the four who very obviously can't live a normal life because he's made of rocks. And whereas the other three are sort of they're just normal people, and like their
Yeah, they
powers are
can turn
nothing
their
but
powers on and off, can't they?
yeah, their
To an
powers are
extent.
nothing but useful because it means they can either fly or stretch or go invisible. Whereas his just completely upends his entire life, and there was I guess this comes from it not being an origin story, but there's never really any reckoning with that. But yeah, I thought he was very good. I enjoyed his and Johnny's sort of banter together as sort of the fun uncles. I thought, yeah, more than anything, I think they did actually nail the family dynamic. Like it did feel like a first family in a way that lots of in the previous adaptations haven't really.
Yeah, and on a similarly positive note, I'm really pleased that we're kind of over that kind of 2010s, late 2000s grim dark superhero phase. I think that's what the 2015 one that it was sort of swimming in those waters that were around at the time because it came out a year after Man of Steel, grim darkified Superman, and obviously that was in the vein of The Dark Knight. And I love the Dark Knight movies, but when other film directors then try and do the same thing, and studios are like, right, so the kids want darkness now. And especially when it comes to Fantastic Four, that's not what it needs. And yeah, I mean, there are elements that I do like about the 2015 Fantastic Four film. I can sort of almost see in it an interesting sci-fi body horror film, but at the same time, that is not what Fantastic Four is. And yeah, like you say, this does actually feel like they're a family. You could say that this is a little bit of a conservative kind of film. It has a very conservative, airbrushed view of this. Like you said, this version of the 60s is kind of like the way that Happy Days presented the 50s. It kind of, or Back to the Future even, it ignores an awful lot of difficult parts of history and things that were happening at the time. But that's the movies.
I think it reminded me of sort of when Brad Bird was talking about creating The Incredibles, which I think in sort of as a tangent, I think we probably should mention that The Incredibles is the best Fantastic Four film that anyone's ever managed to make. Where he was talking about the way that they decided on the powers for all of the superheroes in the family and basing them off their sort of traditional role in the nuclear family. Like you've got the mum being stretched everywhere, going to a place. So what's the dad being really strong, the kid being really full of energy, and the teenager wanting to disappear. And I think that was something that this film reminded me of that because it did feel like it was putting everyone into those boxes. I do think you're right, Marie, and I think the making motherhood sort of a superpower did feel like it was a deliberate choice being made, and it was quite refreshing to see it, refreshing in its own way to see something like that. I am slightly concerned that it is. I obviously it's not particularly my place to say, but I was concerned that it was maybe slightly reductive, and I think as well because of my own personal relationship with Vanessa Kirby's films, where I think she's an incredibly good actress who's somehow managed to almost exclusively choose quite badly written, stereotypical female characters. I mean, as much as I love Ridley Scott's Napoleon, I don't think her Josephine is the most well-rounded character. And and the less said about not Fantastic Four, Fast and Furious, Hobbs and Shaw, the better probably. But
About that.
yeah, oh yeah, wish
We
I
all
had.
had.
Yeah, but yeah, I felt it did feel quite conservative in a way that I think I think if it had happened 3 years ago in America, we might not have raised an eyebrow too much. But now it does. There's an extra edge, I think, now to that sort of thing, given the political situation.
No Cold War either. Just suddenly thought you talked about Brad Bird just then. Like Brad Bird also directed The Iron Giant, which is a period film set in an alternate late 1950s, early 60s Cold War era.
Yeah. Well,
and that's very because the Cold War is very present in that.
Well, that's because they said this so quickly at the start that I thought I must have misheard them. But they said, "Oh, every country in the world has agreed to give up its military." And you go, "What?"
I missed that.
Yeah, no, there is no military on the entire planet. They're literally, which I actually quite liked, as the fact they are literally living in a 60s tech utopia. Except I mean,
this is in our Earth, so a lot of those things probably didn't happen.
Yeah, but
that we're saying.
Yeah, but in terms of, but I really liked that they're living in this utopia. My only issue was that then by the end of the film, they're still living in a utopia. Like, surely the point of everything's great isn't to then have Mark Gatiss say at the end, I think I wrote this down, just when you thought we couldn't love, admire, and appreciate them being the Fantastic Four anymore, you sort of think, well, they went from being the most loved people on a perfect planet to the most loved people on a perfect planet, but now they have a baby. And I'm not convinced anything particular has changed.
No, it's quite funny, isn't it? Because it makes a big thing of like that. Like, we're getting the origin story out of the way. This is not an origin story movie, but in that regard, from Marvel's point of view and the MCU's point of view, this is an origin story because it's like setting up these characters and these actors as these characters, and this is them at their baseline, and this is where they'll go next. So in a way, they kind of they're quite sneaky. They've kind of had their cake and eat it because they don't go through. They race over the sort of, them going to space and getting their powers and everything. But it is still essentially an origin movie. It's still establishing them as characters.
I think we're very quickly running out of time, so I think we should just briefly talk about the post-credits sequence and how this is going to go into the MCU moving forward. So Maria, what did you think of the post-credits? Not the cartoon. They did actually do a very nice they remade the Hanna-Barbera theme intro, but they'd obviously swapped the faces out to make them look a bit more like the cast, which I thought was a really nice touch as one. But the second post-credits scene, what did you think?
Yeah, so in the first post-credit scene, poor Franklin finds himself in the presence of Dr. Doom, who apparently was Robert Downey Jr. We don't see his face. His mask is on the table, and then Franklin's touching his face. I think it's a huge setup for Doomsday. I believe in the comics. Again, I haven't read the comics, but my partner's a big fan and he keeps filling me in, bless him. Franklin is hugely powerful. He's one of the most powerful beings, I believe. So I'm thinking Doomsday is going to revolve a lot around Franklin and Doctor Doom, whether he's taking Franklin or if we're going to, maybe Franklin's going, head to head with Doctor Doom. Maybe the final fight in Doomsday is literally just going to be Baby and Robert Downey Jr., which I am.
He's 5 now, isn't he?
With.
In this, he's 5. So
yeah. Well, still a baby, really, isn't it?
Well, my daughter's not a baby.
Toddler.
Not toddler. Going to school.
Well, maybe a toddler and Robert Downey Jr.
It's not a toddler.
I will absolutely take that. I want to see that. But yeah, I think it's setting it up very heavily what we can expect in Doomsday.
Yeah, I actually really liked it. As far as reviewing Marvel's post-credit scenes go, I actually really liked it. I thought it was genuinely quite creepy, the sort of the way they introduced Doctor Doom, where Frank, he is just like Sue rounds the corner and then he's crouched down next to her child, and you do sort of go, oh, maybe he is actually like a big bad. And in a way, it felt more like the sort of post-credit scenes you used to see before during the Infinity Saga, where it was just like a 2-minute sequence where Thanos is sort of in the shadows and says something like, better get me a big glove, and then they're out of there, instead of feeling like a setup to a strange cameo featuring Charlize Theron or Brett Goldstein, like some of the more recent ones. But yeah, what about you, Ryan? Are you excited for Doomsday and where the Marvel Cinematic Universe is heading next?
Yeah, I can't wait. It's just, the one thing we didn't talk about actually was that the Franklin the baby can raise people from the dead, which feeds into Marvel's other thing where it can't keep characters dead for more than a few minutes. So you've got this character that can raise people from the dead, which you mentioned Star Trek Into Darkness in your clip, James. That will create some interesting problems because you've got a character that can basically just revive anybody. It'll be like in like the medic character in a shooting game that just runs around just reviving people when they get shot.
Yeah. And because he's a 4/5-year-old child, they can't kill him.
No, presumably not.
They can't kill him.
The Omen, is it? Even the Omen doesn't kill the kid.
Yeah.
So it's all to play for. It's incredibly exciting, isn't it?
We're all thrilled, and it's worth mentioning as well that in Thunderbolts, Marvel's last film, that post-credit scene does end with the Fantastic Four's ship coming in, from apparently nowhere, which we don't. I was expecting us to get to in one of the post-credit scenes for this. I was expecting that to be, let's go, and we've got to go to real Earth or whatever our Earth's called.
Yeah, there's going to be some multiverse shenanigans, isn't there? So that it's not all set in the 60s forever.
Something will happen. But yeah, so as Ryan says, it's all to play for. We'll all be waiting with bated breath. Do we want to put a number on it? Should we put a number out of? We've got Maria. You've got a review on the site on filmstories.co.uk. Were you giving it 4 stars? Or did you say still happy? Yep.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I thought this was really enjoyable, and that's all I want from a Marvel film. 4 stars.
Ryan, where do you land?
Yeah, I'd say my idea of enjoyable was more like, I'd say it's more like 3 stars. I thought the first half was 4, and that's why I was a bit frustrated, because I thought if it carries on like this is going to be one of my favourite Marvel films in ages. I actually thought, for me, Thunderbolts edged this. I thought Thunderbolts felt like a more complete film that followed through on all the things that it set up, and this set up some really interesting things that its backside couldn't quite cash. But yeah, 3 stars.
I think I'm probably on a sort of similar page. I'd say a low 3. I'm sorry, Maria, definitely closer to 2 than 4 for me, I think. But yeah, I agree. I really liked the first half, and then it just made the second half more disappointing. Star Trek Into Darkness, incidentally, it made me think of it because when they arrived in Galactus's world, that looked a lot like the world that I remember them going to in Star Trek Into Darkness.
I thought you were referring to the triple blood, where they used the triple blood to bring back to cure death.
Well, that too, but the bit that mainly took it away was I think it was the color palette. It was something about that made you think, oh, this is just like sort of generic space cave. But yeah, some some differing opinions on Fantastic Four, and that's what you come to film stories for disagreeing disagreeably. And that just about wraps up our spoiler chat for the Fantastic Four First Steps. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. If you'd like more films and nonsense from the Film Stories team, you can go to filmstories.co.uk for the latest news, features, and written reviews. If you want to stick around on our YouTube channel, which is probably where you found this, if you found this anywhere else, let us know, and we'll, I don't know, send our lawyers after them, I suppose. But if you stick around on the YouTube channel, we've got all sorts of other spoiler chats like this one. Do subscribe to get more of those when they arrive. We're also on social media at Film Stories or at Film Stories Mag, I believe, on Instagram, Blue Sky, X, Facebook probably, TikTok, all the usual places. You'll find us. And we've also got a weekly newsletter, which you can subscribe to at filmstories.co.uk. You'll get a very helpful pop-up that we know you all love. And so with that, all that's left to say is goodbye from us. So it's goodbye from me, James Harvey.
Goodbye from me, Maria Lattila.
It's goodbye from me, Galactus.
And take care. Have a fantastic day, everybody. Ow. My neck is a mess. I think that, yeah, I think that was okay. Lovely, thank you.